Welcome back to our newest episode of Bookish Banter. We're joined with Colin yet again. We're a little bit late recording some of this, but that's quite all right because it was a long book, a lot longer than I had anticipated. I was showing Colin my version before we started recording. There are no paragraph breaks, so that
That's
really
not
does
how that's
add quite
that's
a
a
bit.
that's a printing error, I think. Um,
The entire book's like that, so it's like.
well,
hmm.
you keep talking because now I want to see because eh, because in the German edition,
Oh,
no,
I
maybe
guess
that is actually no, the German is the same way. Yeah,
I
you're
guess
oh no,
we
there's
should.
paragraph break. No, there's paragraph breaks in the German edition. So
Okay.
they are incredibly long paragraphs, but that's normal for German. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a translator and or editor and or printing error.
I mean, yeah, there are some paragraph breaks, but sometimes we're going like 10 pages
Oh,
with no
well, yeah,
paragraph
that's,
breaks.
welcome to German, although yours is translated. So I guess it seems like the translator just mirrored what the German text has. So,
Probably. And that being said, we should probably introduce that we are, that's my fault for not saying this at the top. We read The Trial by Franz Kafka. Um, we'll get
der
into,
Prozess.
yes, in the original German. We'll get into the I'm going to use this term loosely, plot of the book
Yeah.
in a bit. But the overall gist of it is, and the reason I was intrigued, it's about a man who is accused of a crime and put on trial slash arrested for no reason told to him. Um, the whole process is very strange. It is very bureaucratic in the most evilest of senses.
The whole
Um,
thing is like a nightmare.
yeah,
Yeah.
and we'll get into the surrealism, I guess, as we jump into it. But I guess I'll give overview of the plot. Again, as I said, it's kind of a loose plot. He wakes up one morning, finds himself basically under arrest in his own domicile. Two strange men uh, foreboding and overlooking him. People are gawking at him from windows in apartments close to him, etc. And he's allowed to go about his daily life. So he is technically under arrest, as they said, but he is allowed to live his life normally, day to day, go to work, etc. But he is told, as after a few days, you have to show up to this hearing or something. And he's not told when, he's not told where, he sort of has to figure it out. And it meanders through this long process of talking to various people who have no idea what they're saying, going through the tunnels of the bureaucratic system and the legal system, and overall just bizarre. But we'll get into I guess the intricacies as themes emerge. So you said you've read this many times before, if not
Not
like
many times
once or
before, but
twice.
yeah, no, I mean, I had read it in an upper division German class in undergrad. So
Mm, okay.
I didn't do my doctorate work in literature, but at least not modern or, postmodern, whatever you want to call Kafka literature. But yeah, no, we had the Kafka. You know, you got to have the Kafka in your German repertoire at some point. So
I enjoyed it. It is bizarre, but I enjoyed it in as much as I would suggest it to other people who are looking for a bizarre piece of literature, old literature to read.
well, old. Yeah, I guess you're talking to a medievalist here, so I'm like, what is old? I think of this as quite modern, but yeah, quite recent. No, but it's interesting. Kafka is I think most people would agree that Kafka's magical part of magical realist. He's a magical realist author. Um, I don't know. Had you read any magical realist literature before? I'm just curious.
No, no.
Um, it tends to be it tends to be more popular in Latin America. I think of like Borges is like a great example of magical realism.
Okay.
Kafka's obviously doing his own take on it, and earlier. than a lot of the more Latin American big names in Latin American literature. But I mean, it has the hallmarks of it, right? Like the whole thing is dreamlike, but everyone accepts it as normal, and maybe except the protagonist who's like, "Why is this so bad?" And everyone else is like, "What do you mean it's bad? Everything is normal." Dreamlike quality, jumps, shifts in plot that don't necessarily make sense and are not really supposed to. You could say things like privileging affect over chronology, something like that, or
Yeah,
these are the hallmarks of magical realist literature. So,
the
I mean,
shifting in time was a
yeah,
little bit was kind of bizarre because what
non-sequential. Yeah,
what seemed like a few pages turned out to be like sometimes like almost half a day or something, and then what seemed to be like an entire chapter was like 5 minutes, and I'm like, this is a little okay. I can't keep up with this, but
time
we'll do
dilation.
my best.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, then it's just also Kafka, right? Like Kafka's deep in the woo and deep in the weirdness. Kafka is it's interesting. Kafka's a German writer in the sense that he wrote in German. And German was his native language, but he's not German. He was well, he's um Jewish, a Jewish writer writing in German, living in Prague. And so this also is very much you, these things don't exist anymore. Right. This is very much he's kind of one of the holdovers of older Europe where you would have right you would it was not on you had German speakers in what is now Czech Republic or Czechia, whatever they're calling it now.
Mm.
That's different. B, you had uh a sizable Jewish population in continental Europe. Interesting. And then the intelligentsia is speaking German along with other languages too. So, right, this is just older Europe. He's a holdover of one of these where you could have a writer like this exist. It's like you wouldn't have that today. Somebody living in Prague would write in Czech, right? And that doesn't affect the quality of anyone's writing. It's just it's a historical interesting thing to note that like Kafka's assigned like I got it in undergrad in German assigned in Germany, in Austria, and Switzerland. Assigned, he's one of the big greats of German literature, but he's not German, right? He's Czech, but he's not ethnic Czech. So then there's this interesting kind of thing. German was the language of intelligentsia in Central Europe. Whether it was your native language or not doesn't matter. You'd learn German along with French usually, and those would be right so that you could communicate with the rest of Europe,
Right.
basically. And if you were super fancy, you might learn English, although English was sort of I mean, English was a big language, but it was entering the stage, right? It wasn't so like French and German still like on the continent were the big languages. And so if you wanted anyone to read your work, right? You write in Czech, not going to be so useful, right? You write in
Right.
German, oh, okay, you have instant readership, right?
Right.
And so, yeah, it is just interesting that he's not a German, but he's writing in German. And German is his language, right? That's his native language, to the best of my ability. Yeah, his family spoke Yiddish, but he kind of only spoke a little bit of Yiddish. His Yiddish was not very good. German was his main language. So it's just
Well,
interesting. Language kind of the language mix of Central Europe is very like was more evident in this time period. There was more, you'd have people, various ethnic groups living in under one polity, who maybe all spoke different languages at home, but right, you'd have sort of the language you used out on the street, right? Or the one that everyone kind of the lingua franca, the one that was you could use to get across what you wanted to say to multiple people. And like I
right.
said, for a lot of Central Europe, that really and Eastern Europe for a while too was German. Not as a native language always, but as a lingua franca, definitely. Yeah, I mean the Habsburg Empire, right? This is the left. This is the last little the Habsburg Empire itself, and then the influence of the Habsburgs, right? So if you wanted, like, you'd get German had a similar function in Poland for a long time, right? The intelligentsia, even if they were Polish, would also usually, or if they were educated, would learn German and French usually, or Russian, so that they could talk to other learned people in other parts of Europe. Because otherwise, you're kind of siloed into your little, relatively speaking, smaller languages, obviously with lots of speakers. So, but sorry for the history lesson, but you're a linguist, so I figured that might be interesting to point out. So,
But speaking of history, though, the question is, obviously, we can get into this in a minute. There's an underpinning of life. He's basically describing the surrealism, I guess, of life, like the the monotony of life, if you will, and we'll get into that, but on a more surface level, with the without being allegorical, on the surface level of bureaucracy and government, the history of the area. Again, I've taken Western Civ, but it is not my, I did not dive deep into a lot of this history. Would this have been normal to view bureaucracy and law, the system of law and order, in such a
I
uh,
I think
cynical way?
normal. Well, I don't know if Kafka was a normal person, but I
Well,
think,
obviously not.
yeah. I'm more interested in people who are not normal, and people who watch Wandering Humanists know that like I'm a big fan of Kierkegaard, and Kierkegaard is decidedly not normal. By the way, Kafka was a fan of Kierkegaard, and you can see some Kierkegaardian qualities to that. We won't. That's sort of beyond the scope of today's conversation, but there's some interesting connections there, thematically, philosophical connections. I think. I think other people have probably said this much better than I'm going to say it, but for me, I think Kafka is warning us. He's seeing the beginnings of the hyper bureaucracy, whatever you want to call it, turbo bureaucracy start up, which I mean goes hand in hand with things like, I mean, this had been going on for a while. It's just he's warning us that it's getting worse, right? This is a consequence largely of industrial revolution, right? The industrial revolution and its consequences. We could even say, I will say no more. I don't want to get the show banned, but many consequences to this thing. The more complex industry, more complex societal structures to handle the influx of people into cities, to handle the industry, to handle increased population. What does that do for policing? Right? Like I think Kafka is. I mean, it's so cliche to say he's a prophet, and I think good authors in general, good artists in general, have a prophetic quality to them, whether they're a prophet or not. And not just prophetic quality in the sense of telling the future, because that's not really what prophecy is, right? It's like a revealing. You can have a prophecy about the now, you can have a prophecy about the past, right? But it's a revealing
Yeah.
quality to good art reveals something, right? It uncovers something. Good Lord, you can tell we've been doing some Heidegger on my show. It is there's an uncovering process of it, right? And I think that that's what he's doing here with as it pertains to bureaucracy and like I mean, it's easy to say bureaucracy is evil, but I think of it more, at least the vibe I got, the strong vibe, as the kids say, I got I almost said the process, der Prozess, from the trial, mixing the titles together, the German and English version. The vibe I got is that it's the dehumanization, right, of bureaucracy and how bureaucracy allows, like bureaucracy as an inherently dehumanizing process, and what that then allows you to do once you've dehumanized people, then you can just treat them as little numbers or little, little figures to push around a spreadsheet, basically. Uh, that's my take on it. I think that's what he's trying to point out is like, because it's interesting because a lot of like the quote unquote bad guys in the novel don't come across as like maybe inherently bad people, right?
Well, yes, and
Like
I
them,
wanted to bring
a
that
lot
up
of
too.
them
Yeah.
feel like they're just doing my job, which was something that you heard a couple decades after this book was published as an excuse for things. Well, I was just doing my job. People probably know what I'm talking about there. Like, this just of doing my job. I'm just a cog in the machine. I didn't know. And okay, maybe you don't know. Maybe you do know. It's sort of hard to know what you know. Do you even know what you're doing? Because you don't, the system is so much bigger than you. Now, that's not an excuse if you're doing evil, but you know what I'm saying? Like, it's really hard to know because you don't even, you're like, my job is to go in and like fill out this paperwork. And people get brought in, I fill the paperwork out, and I let them go. I'm like, maybe they're being, arrested for outrageous reasons, but is that dude working there part of the system that's arresting people for outrageous reasons? Of course, but how? Like this is questions that I get into just because of having read like a fair amount of post World War II German literature, just because of classes I had to take. It's not my field of study within German studies, but like you think a lot about this, like with like like the question die Schuldfrage, like the question of guilt, like when you look at like things like the Holocaust, like how who is guilty to what extent and how, and in systems that are highly bureaucratized, it's really hard to even know. So that's something that jumped out at me upon reading this. And obviously Kafka's writing before the Holocaust, but I think
Right.
he's noticing something, right? He's noticing a tendency uh
But
in European societies of like what like um and his protagonist Yosef Ka is like, wait, why is this we doing this? And everyone's like, well, of course we do this. This is what we do. It's a new way of doing things. It's good. It's efficient. So I'll pass the talkie stick, but that's just I think that's my take on what the novel has to say about bureaucracy, I think, broadly speaking. So
I'm torn on where to go here because you brought up a point that would lead me down the rabbit hole of going to the deeper meaning, but I also wanted to sort of hit the more surface bureaucracy stuff a little bit more.
we'll stay with the bureaucracy because we
Okay.
know you and I have both been dealing with some bureaucracy in our life lately. So we can
Yes.
let's as a German speaking colleague of mine likes to say, let's bitch around about it.
The
Let's just bitch
two
around.
the two most pinnacle uh, episodes, I guess, because they're not really chapters, they're like episodes.
They're like
In,
episodes.
yeah,
Yeah.
in this book are when he first really gets a rundown. So the Yosef meets
Mhm.
with someone who's basically going to be his lawyer,
Right.
and he gets a rundown of, okay, this is how the system works, and here are your opportunities to be acquitted or what have you. And the entire explanation of the system is just laughable at best and frightening at worst. And he goes on these huge monologues explaining, well, you have to do this, but you don't know how to do that, but you still have to get to X and Y and Z, but first you have to jump over hurdles A, B, and D. Oh, and don't forget about C over there. Like but none of it has definitive processes or goals or anything. Nothing can be said to be for sure.
Doesn't it feel so contemporary when you read it?
This is the problem.
It feels so much like life right now.
Yeah, I
In the
mean,
truest sense of like cancel culture specifically, but also you could make it, but like specifically with like cancel culture, there's things that are cancelable that you can't know about until you've already been canceled. Okay, that ding-a-ling-a-ling, the bell is ringing. You once you are canceled, if you are canceled, what do you have to do to get back in people's good graces? Kind of hard to tell. It sort of just depends. No real process for that, but there's things you can try. Ding-a-ling-a-ling, like there's all kinds of stuff that I think Kafka is. I think he's just noticing. He's an early
no,
noticer, right? He's just noticing things early on.
thank you. Thank you for saying that because now it made a perfect connection. You're absolutely correct. The character of Brock. So there's a character named Brock who's a merchant who Yosef meets uh, another client of his lawyer. After this whole episode of the lawyer explaining all the stuff he has to do, he's like, "Oh gosh, this could take forever." Then when he comes back to his lawyer's house a little while later, he meets this guy Brock and realizes, "Oh, you've been going through this process for 5 years. You are absolutely stripped of your humanity. You have no sanity left. You are at the beck and call of this sickly lawyer who's like who has no respect for you. You are not human anymore. You are a dog because he literally gets on the floor and is like,
Well, dogs come up later.
right, no, that'll come up later, but he's
Yeah,
literally at the floor at his feet, like waiting to be pet, basically.
yeah,
And your analogy of cancel culture, Brock has been canceled,
yeah,
and he's trying his best to get back into the good graces of something and someone, and he just can't. He's been stripped of his humanity. And that's what they want, right? That's what those people who cancel you, they want you to be stripped of your humanity and completely debase yourself to the religion.
yeah.
And so he's debasing himself to the bureaucracy, which is
Which is
the
a kind of a
religion.
religion. I mean, bureaucracy is an egregore. Everyone's on the right wing says that, but it's true. Right? Bureaucracy is an egregore by definition. It's an amorphous entity. And it kind of, but it somehow seems to work together towards an end, which is weird. And it doesn't matter that, like I said, to what I was to connect it to what I was saying earlier. It doesn't matter that individual people in the system don't know what the end is. It doesn't matter because there is an end. You might not know what it is, but there's one, and you're moving in that direction. So it has a subtle body, right? It has, like Tertullian talks about with spirits, it has some sort of weird weird quality to it that's moving in a direction. And yeah, you can try to placate it, right? Many people have tried throughout the years, throughout human history, to placate various spirits, and uh, I think yeah, there's placation happening in the book. There's placation that happens when people are canceled by various spirits in our world, in our day and age, right? Maybe I go and do a cry video on Instagram or whatever the hell it is people do. I just cry enough, maybe, right? Like I'll sacrifice my tears, I'll sacrifice my dignity, I'll sacrifice my money, I'll sacrifice my time, right? Um, yep.
Well, and then it all leads to, I think, the second pinnacle episode for me was obviously the very end, where he's talking to the priest in the cathedral. So it's a long sort of fable that the priest tells Yosef, which is the entire novel in one small soliloquy, I guess. There's a man guarding a door, and another man comes and says, "May I enter into the law? Like, can I enter in and see what the law is all about?" And the doorkeeper's like, "No, you can't." And so he sits there his entire life pining and waiting, he keeps asking, keeps asking. And finally he's on his last leg, like, "Can I please get in?" And he's like, "Well, you could have got in anytime you wanted to. But now you're dying, so I'm going to close the door. Bye." Like, so it's this idea of asking permission constantly to do something that you are allowed to do anyway, is what I got from it.
Yeah.
And working your entire life to make means to an end, right? And getting nowhere. And this is where I guess it gets into the deeper vein of like what is life and what is the meaning of life.
Well,
I think
and also as Hadaway has quite astutely asked all those years ago in the 90s, what is love? Baby, don't hurt me.
love or life.
Well, what is it? No, yeah, no, Kafka is, dude, you wanted to read Kafka. I was like, okay, be prepared for a philosophical novel, my
Oh
good
yeah,
sir. This
absolutely,
is Franz Kafka we're talking about here. Yeah.
absolutely. No, I
Yeah.
knew I knew what I was getting into. Um,
I'm
I
so
wish.
proud of you because normally you like deeper philosophical thing. You tend to be you want like the hard facts. You want the facts and figures. You want these things. And I'm like, wow, he wants to read something more like woo and like more Colin directional. I like this. This is yeah. This is
But for the precise reason as I started out, right? I wanted the surface level stuff to talk about first, and
yeah.
then deep dive into the deeper stuff, which it
Well, I have a
really.
story. I mean, at some point we can do it in whatever order you want. I do have a real story. I will anonymize it because it did happen to me of where I was actually attempted to be canceled when I was working at an academic position once. They tried to actually cancel me, and I in the moment of it happening, I thought of this novel. I was like, "Oh, this is literally like the trial," and I started to laugh, which probably didn't help in the moment. I can tell the story if you want, but it was yeah, I started to giggle because I thought of this book. So.
Yeah, no, go ahead with your
It's
story
a
first
short
because it
story,
might
and
it
thankfully
might.
it didn't come to anything. But so I was teaching a course um, at a university, and I don't even know what I had said. That was the interesting thing. The not knowing why you're arrested. We'll circle back to that. So I was brought up on charges, so to speak, with my department head. Now, thankfully, my department head liked me and recognized it was bullshit. But my department head was also inside the system and had to operate within the system. And so there was this kind of interesting, like wink, wink, nudge, nudge things happening because my department head's I'm still friends with, and she's great. Don't work at this place anymore. But not because of this. The contract just ran out. That's just the way it goes. But it was the semester of my defense of my dissertation too, so I was very stressed out. Apparently, a student thought I made some inappropriate joke or comment or something like that, and reported me. Now, I was brought in by the department chair, and she told me, okay, you've been essentially flagged, to use a Seinfeld reference. It's been flagged. Okay. I asked, well, what did I do wrong? What did I say? And I said, well, I was told, okay, well, you made an inappropriate comment or joke. And I said, can I know what I said or supposedly said? And I was told, no. because to tell you what you said would give away the identity of the person who reported me. And I thought, well, last time I checked, I didn't say this because I was like, oh, I instantly recognized what was going on. But I thought, well, and last time I checked in English common law, which is where we get our American system from, you're usually a face your accuser. That's usually a thing. It happens. So if you're not willing to have the guts to face me, then why are you bringing me? Why are you putting in anything? Like basically, quit being a pussy. I didn't say that, of course. I said, "Oh, interesting." And so I said, "Well, what's going to have to happen, right?" Oh, well, I'll just have to observe your class. And so it was this ridiculous legal fiction, essentially, where my incredibly based and wonderful department chair had to play the game, and she had to like, we got observed anyhow once a semester. So observed my
Right.
class, gave me high marks, and said, "Yeah, doc, Colin's great, and he knows how to teach." And but yeah, anyhow, it was just like this ridiculous thing. But I literally thought of this book when that happened to me. I was like, wow, it's literally like The Trial by Kafka. And it wasn't just that I was brought up on charges, that I wasn't allowed to know what I had done wrong. And I was like, ho ho. So life is Kafkaesque oftentimes, and the more we go into cancel culture, the more Kafkaesque it will get. I guess is what that's just an anecdote from my life, but it is a real story.
Well, and I was going to bring this up because I guess an anecdote of my life, again, academia, and I think you will agree with this. This novel also brought to my mind, oh, so Yosef is looking for the right person to find information, right? That he basically might as well be in an academic setting. So I have said before, and this is a paraphrase of something my mother has said, and she's absolutely right. In the academic setting, in a university, everyone who works at that university can answer one question correctly. They'll tell you a bunch of other stuff that is incorrect, but they can answer one question correctly, and it's your job if you need to ask that question to find the person who knows the answer to your question. And you can go to every single person and hunt them down, and you will ask the same question to 8 million different people, and you'll get 8 million different answers, but only one of them is correct. That's like how academia works, in my
Yep.
opinion, in my
Oh
in my
yeah.
experience.
Oh yeah. No, in this we're not unique in this, right? Like
But
this
he
is
was doing this. He was doing this for his trial, right? He's going to he
yeah.
went he went to an artist for God's sakes to ask how the legal system works, and he couldn't get an answer. He went to a magistrate, couldn't really get an answer. Went to the magistrate's wife who like tried to seduce him, couldn't get an answer. Like he overturned every stone, could not find an answer. He found no, I take that back. He found some answers, but nothing that was helpful.
Right.
This is exactly what you get when you get to university. So
Are you trying to
if
say,
anyone's going,
Mitch, are you trying to say this is the system's greatest trick?
yeah,
I've made two Algebra Cabin Man references. I hope that this anyhow, we'll continue. Yeah.
lost on me, but
That's okay.
someone out there will appreciate it.
Someone might get it.
But yeah, that was my big aha moment of, oh, I've lived through this too, of trying to desperately find the answers to one particular question, and no one could give it to me. Um, but you brought up the fact earlier that so many of these characters were not good or evil, right? Like we couldn't find a bad guy, right? There's no one that you're like, oh, this person is clearly the bad guy.
It's almost because like they're not allowed to be human. So you don't get human evil or human virtue. You just kind of get system components with names and like the thin veneer of personality.
But I find this very interesting because as much as I hate to use this term, it's very postmodern to be he's writing in a surrealist frame, but in a realistic way, in as much as the characters are human, in my opinion. Because every character that you do meet is neither good nor bad. They're just human. Like everyone has their flaws, everyone has their ups. Even Yosef, the protagonist. I kind of think he's a piece of shit, quite honestly. I mean, he doesn't seem like a person that I would necessarily feel sorry for. I mean, do I think he deserved what he got? No. And spoiler alert, yeah, he gets killed at the end because he doesn't want to play the game of the bureaucracy, and they're like, fine, we'll kill you for some unknown crime.
Yep.
Um, but I do not find him to be a pitiable protagonist. I thought he was kind of a know-it-all, very egotistical chauvinist. Like, go through the laundry list of things that a white man could be in today's society, and he fit those bills.
I actually feel bad for him, so I have a lot of pity for Joseph. But that's yeah. So
I didn't. I don't know. He. In fact, as I finished it, I was like, "Oh, okay. I guess Yosef is kind of like the Trump of that era."
you got it. Well, this is my take on it. But when you read Kafka, protagonist is you.
Fair enough. Yeah,
So read him as it. Yeah, you are the protagonist.
but I didn't want to be Yosef because he was
That's
kind of an
it's
asshole.
just you have to read them that way. That's my opinion, but only. But yeah, you really should read them with you as you're the protagonist. Yeah.
Well, again, deeply speaking, so removing ourselves from the surface level, I think in the end it is a big discussion of life, right? And Kafka hits all three of the major social science groups, right? He hits law, he hits art, and he hits religion at the end. Joseph is seeking answers from all three of these areas and is getting nothing, and finally resigns himself to his fate and is like, "Well, I'm not going to fight anymore," and ends up getting killed.
Yeah, I know that
I
this is
thought that
not
was interesting.
it is interesting. I know that this is not yeah, I'm mixing channels here because this is something we talked about somewhat recently on my channel, but you can see the Kierkegaardian influence here with Yosef K, where he resigns himself right to his fate. So he's inhabiting he's becoming the knight of infinite resignation, and he gives up
Mm,
on faith. So he's not making a leap to faith by virtue of the absurd. Now that might mean nothing to you, and that's fine because it's a Kierkegaardian thing. But it's just something I noticed, and maybe some of our viewers here have read some Kierkegaard. But in Fear and Trembling, Kierkegaard goes all into this, and so you can hear, you just right here, you can really see the influence on Kafka, which I find cool. I find that cool. There's
yeah.
Kafka's, I think, coming to a different conclusion than Kierkegaard. Kierkegaard cites faith, not fate. Faith as the highest virtue, highest passion. But I think and I think this is maybe where Kafka is more postmodern. He's like you just the best we have, the best I can. It's like the Pawn Stars meme. Best I can offer you is death. Yeah, death, but the hands of an uncaring state. Yeah, but I mean, if you think about the number of humans that met their hands or met their ends at the hands of uncaring states in the 20th century, I mean, there is it's the age. It's I mean, there's a reason Moldbug calls it the age of democide. I mean, it is the age where states liquidate whole sections of their population, in mass in a way they never could before. Not that they weren't doing it before, but I mean, in untold numbers. Um, so again, I think that this is. I think Kafka's. I don't know what he's trying to do, but I interpret it as a warning that nobody heeded. But I think we should heed it now because you think the 20th century was bad. Just wait we got our 21st century going on here, and it's going to be bad in a different way. But it's going to be bad if we don't start if we just allow the dehumanization to continue. That's what I take from it in the end.
And that is a perfect way to end it because I'm going to read this last paragraph of the book because you referenced it earlier, and it's a perfect ending spot. But the hands of one man were right at Kay's throat, Ka's throat, as you said,
Yeah.
while the other thrust the knife into his heart and turned it there twice. With failing sight, Ka saw, excuse me, Ka saw how the men drew near his face, leaning cheek to cheek to observe the verdict. Like a dog, he said. It seemed as though the shame was to outlive him. So, the phrase like a dog. Um, I referenced the dog earlier as the merchant Brock was at the lawyer's feet, begging for his mercy and his help. And here at the end, they have another reference to a dog, as Yosef is being slaughtered, like
Yeah.
an uncaring, untamed dog, I guess, who didn't do what they wanted him to do. So it's the ultimate, coming back to the surface level. It's the ultimate. The government doesn't care about you.
Yeah, that's the theme here on the
Yeah, no, that's always
it's
my theme.
it's the theme is they really it's not even and it is that they don't care about you. That is true. But I would argue also that it's that they literally cannot care about you, even if they
Yeah,
wanted to. They don't, but they couldn't if they wanted to, which is also something that I do think Kafka would agree with that. I think from what little I've read of Kafka, I think it's uncaring state because it hates you, but also a benevolent quote unquote state also doesn't care about you because it can't.
right. But
So yeah.
if you don't play their game, they're going to
Oh yeah.
remove you,
Yeah, you were removed. You were deleted. Yeah.
literally canceled.
Yes, literally canceled. I mean, that's the ultimate cancellation, right? Like, so
Well, next, at the end of this month, which is rapidly coming to a close, we're going to read Being There, which is extremely, extremely, extremely short, and it's one of Colin's suggestions. So
it's very good.
I'm
Can
looking
I make
forward
a
to this.
recommendation
Yeah,
that if people do read it, it's very short.
yeah,
Do
very short.
please also watch the movie because Jerzy Kosinski wrote both. Same author for both, and the book is great. The movie's astounding. Peter Sellers, one of the funniest. Can we swear? Can we
Sure.
swear? One of the funniest fucking films I've ever seen in my life. And also uplifting and profound at the same time. Um, the yeah, we're going to be discussing the book, it sounds like, but the movie's really good. It's same author. So and the movie goes in kind of expands upon the book in a way, which is cool. It's very funny too. So
So
yeah.
if you're tired of all the doom and gloom that we've been talking about, we'll maybe we'll have something more uplifting to talk about in our next
And
episode.
it really is just to tease a little more. It's a really good companion piece to Network, which we've also talked about.
Yes.
Yeah, it gets a lot into media and how perception. It's all about perception via media. So
Well, we look forward to that conversation, which will be happening very soon because it is a short book. But for now, I'm going to put the trial back on the shelf gladly. Maybe I'll return to it another time, but on the shelf it goes.